Hello there guys. Today I'm going to be painting the camouflage on this German half track using this brand new NEOECO airbrush. I was contacted by NEOECO a few weeks ago now and they offered me their airbrush for a review. They gave it to me for free of course, but they didn't tell me what to say. They asked me to give it an honest review and a trial, so that's what I'm going to do. So NEOECO's sort of niche there is low cost airbrushes. You can see here from their website they've got a range of products. The one I'm looking at is the top left, the SJ83, which as you can see retails for $39.99 US dollars. They do ship to other countries. They sent mine to the UK, so don't worry that it's quoted in US dollars on their website. Their website has a breakdown of everything that's included in the pack, and it seems on the face of it quite good value for money. We've got 3 needles there. We've got a 0.2, a 0.3 and a 0.5mm needle, and of course the nozzle to go with it. We've got a variety of cups for paint cups, and we've even got a quick release mechanism. So let's take a look at what it looks like actually in real life rather than on the website. It's certainly got a nice sturdy box and some sturdy packaging to keep it safe. Got a card in here with QR codes to the links. As a lot of companies do these days, the resources are online, so you need a phone to access that really, because you need to scan the QR code, although you could just search for their website. I'll show you those resources later. Inside, really well packaged here. What have we got? We've got this large plastic paint container, which inside it contains a metal paint container, which I can't get the lid off at the moment, but that's fine. We have got a smaller plastic paint cup, and inside there, that's really useful actually. We've got a bag of O-rings and gaskets and things like that. That's really useful because you can't always get spares and repairs for airbrushes. In here, in its individual plastic tube, we've got a nozzle, which one's this? The 0.5. Okay. This is the other nozzle, so this must be the 0.2. Yeah, it is. Fantastic. We've got a spanner. Not quite sure what the spanner is for, because well, I've only used one airbrush, but generally speaking I thought they were hand disassemblable, if that's a word. We've got a little pipette there. Of course we've got the airbrush itself. Certainly feels decent quality. Quite stylish actually. I quite like the black, the gold and the silver there. Oh, slipped out slightly in shipping. We've got our 2 needles here. So that's our 0.5mm needle. That's our 0.2mm needle. And then, oh, we've got a quick release mechanism. That's quite unusual, especially in such a, I don't want to say cheap kit, but in a low price kit, a low price airbrush, that's really handy to have that quick release mechanism. So let's have a quick look at some of the features of the airbrush and then we'll give it the test, which is the most important thing. So we had the 0.5 and 0.2 needles in the box, so it must be the 0.3 needle which is installed already. We've got a few nice features here which I'm not used to actually, and in fact my airbrush, which was significantly more expensive than this, doesn't have. First off, at the back here we've got, I don't know what the technical name is, it's like a limiter, a backstop as you will. And you can turn that to change the range of travel for the trigger. So right now it goes all the way back. If we give it a bit of a twist to tighten it up a bit, you can see there that the range of the trigger is now limited. I can only put it back that far. That's really useful for very fine, very delicate work. I'm sure I've all been in that situation where we're moving the airbrush in a very particular fine pattern, and it's really easy to get a sort of sympathetic squeeze as you rotate your arm to airbrush across the model, and that feature should hopefully prevent that from happening. You can see here we also have a valve just below the paint cup, which is used to fine-tune the air pressure. Of course, compressors will have a regulator on them to change the air pressure output, but this is useful for sort of slightly fine-tuning that. And again, that's a feature I don't have on my airbrush, so I'm a little bit jealous of this. Let's get this connected and see how it goes. Before I start painting though, let's have a quick look at that quick release mechanism. So the mechanism comes in two parts. This part here is what screws into your air hose where your airbrush normally would do. So of course normally I would connect my airbrush hose directly to the airbrush, but instead I connect this quick release mechanism . Once they're both screwed in, the pin goes into the hose with a click, and that's now nice and secure. Just like any connection, it's not going to come out by accident. But the benefit of this is if I want to swap airbrushes or for some reason just get this airbrush off to maybe clean it a bit better or something, I can just pull down on these rings here on the quick release and the airbrush comes away. That's really handy, and of course there's no air coming out of my air hose because the quick release mechanism keeps the air tight. Originally I was going to 3D print a Hetzer kit for this airbrushing experiment, but I think it's the temperature at the moment. It's really cold in my garage and my 3D printer is just not having it. So I'm going to use this old half-track kit. I built this a while ago, just before I relocated from Malaysia to the UK. I got it all painted as a sort of a captured US vehicle, based on this photograph here actually. But then I've lost the track since then, I never really got around to finishing it. So we're going to use this as a paint mule today, and we're going to give it a bit of a hard test. I really like the style of camouflage on German vehicles, where you've got the yellow base coat, the olive green splodges and the outlines to those splodges in the red-brown colour. And it's probably quite hard to do. So I'm going to give it a crack using this new airbrush. So what I'm going to do here is just paint over the entire model. I'm not going to strip the existing paint or anything like that. Yes, I know I should, but I'm not going to. Before I continue, I will apologise for the quality of lighting in my airbrush booth. It's just not very good. My garage is not very well lit, but I don't really have many other options. But at least you can see the process. So here I am spraying Tamiya XF1 flat black, mixed with Tamiya lacquer thinner. This is using the 0.3mm needle that comes by default installed in the airbrush. So lovely smooth action. And although we've got a bit of texture to the paint that's going down, that's a result of me just going over the existing layers of the model. It's nothing to do with the paint or the thinning or the airbrush itself. Equally, in a moment you'll see that that USA and the star there shows through a little bit through the black, and again that's simply because that's somewhat raised from the surface because it was brush painted, and I should have probably have sanded that back. So there were no particular surprises here. The paint went down very smoothly, as I'd expect from a brand new airbrush. Very controllable, all as I would expect. I didn't paint the inside of the half track because I'm only interested in painting the exterior camouflage. And since I had some black in the airbrush, I decided to give a base coat to my Airfix 1/48 scale Defiant, which is nearing the paint stage. Or well, entering the paint stage now, isn't it? And again, as you can see, that's a really smooth coat of paint going down there. Perhaps my paint's ever so slightly too thick, but the airbrush with that 0.3mm needle is really putting it down very nicely. Here you can see the completed base coat of black. The camouflage was going to be completed with AK real colours, so I took their Dunkelgelb colour. This is their 1944 variant of it, which is a little bit lighter than the other two. This was again thinned with Tamiya lacquer thinner, and again a lovely smooth flow there, no issues whatsoever filling in this camouflage. I'm painting this as I normally would with some thin coats. You can always increase the opacity, but it's a lot harder to decrease it. On the side panels there, I'm generally going in a vertical motion, and that means that any unevenness in the paint job will sort of simulate dirt and grime running down the side of the vehicle. Again, I probably could have thinned this paint a little bit more, although having said that, when we get to the end of the coat, it doesn't look anywhere near as yellow and anywhere near as opaque as I might have expected. I do find that quite a lot though with AK real colour paints, that they do tend to change shade a lot more than other paints as they dry. Next up of course was the olive green spots, again painted with AK real colours. So while the Dunkelgelb base coat dried, I set about changing to the 0.2mm needle. I had a couple of issues here taking an airbrush apart. The main one is when I tried to remove this black back section here, it was really hard to get that off and not take out that orangey gold section as well. But I got there in the end. It's always a bit hard when you're trying a new piece of equipment which is slightly different from the setup of your own. I probably should have read the instructions first. In fact, I definitely should, as we will see in a moment. Anyway, with the various components released, I could pull the nozzle off the front, unscrew the air cap, and then release the needle from the front. Like so. Minor point here, but it would have been really nice if they had packaged in the box an empty tube labelled 0.3 and a tube for the nozzle as well, because now I'm taking the 0.2 needle out of its case and I'm going to have to put the 0.3 needle in it and remember that actually it's not the 0.2, it's the 0.3. So it's great that it has a needle in it already, because obviously that means you can use the airbrush straight out of the box, but it would be nice to have that spare packaging there. But that is a very minor point. So I slid the 0.2 needle back in. I tend to do this from the front because it means you're not pushing the point of the needle through anything that might sort of damage it. The 0.2mm nozzle on, everything closed up, and then disaster. I put the green paint in, I applied the air, and that's what happened. Massive bubbles in the paint cup, paint going all over the place. Luckily I had the model out of the way so it didn't get hit. Obviously I did something wrong there in the setup for the needle. So at this point I thought it might be a good idea to actually read the instructions. So I headed over to NEOECO's webpage, and it turns out they've got some really useful information. They've got instructions and videos on a range of topics, from setting up the airbrush for the first time, using it, cleaning it, polishing the needle, etc, etc. Well worth a look. And it turns out that my problem was caused by the air cap not being tight enough. So by giving that a few turns with the included spanner, my problem went away. No more bubbles in the paint cup. So on my newly messed up piece of paper, I decided just to try out a couple of very small patches of green to see how controllable the paint was. And I found that by tightening that backstop to reduce the trigger motion, and by slightly reducing the air pressure as well on the bottom of the airbrush, I was able to get some fairly fine spots with the paint. This felt really controllable here. I particularly liked the trigger limiter because it made me much less nervous about accidentally dumping a load of paint onto the model. I decided those green spots weren't really big enough, so I made them a bit larger. And there's our green spotted half track, almost finished. Now it was the final test, the very thin red-brown lines that go around these green spots. For this I really limited that trigger again, even further than for the green spots. Still using the 0.2 needle of course. My paint is AK Real Colour still and it's really thinned down, and I really turned down the air pressure as well there underneath the paint cup. Finally, I also removed the cap at the end of the airbrush because I found it enabled me to get a slightly finer paint line. And then I went for it. I think that first line there came out quite well. Perhaps my paint could be a little bit thinner. It is speckling a little bit around the edges, but the control that the airbrush offered me was fantastic. Knowing that the pressure was nice and low, I had much more sort of fine control over the air pressure than my compressor allows. I actually really enjoyed this process. And there we go, back into some decent light so we can see the final result. Now that yellow has not come out well at all, it's way too faint. I guess I just put the layer down too thinly over the black. But nevertheless, I think that airbrush has served me well there. I am not the greatest airbrusher, especially when it comes to fine detail, and I feel like that's really helped me out. There are a couple of sort of runs and splats in a couple of places which are without a doubt down to my lack of skill rather than the tool I was using. But yes, really pleased with the experience of using that airbrush, and in fact when I started to edit this video I decided I wasn't happy with this final result in terms of the colour, so I did go through the whole process again using a different colour for the Dunkelgelb base. I didn't film much of the process because it was identical to what I've shown you in the video, but here you can see the final result with a better colour base coat. So there we go guys, that was my quick look at the NEOECO SJ83 airbrush. Now I know it's really easy for me to sit here and say this is fantastic, it's great airbrush when I got it for free, but I am genuinely impressed by this. It's great value for money, $40 for everything you get here. I'm not quite sure why you get so many paint cups, to be honest, but the fact is you've got a complete kit here for somebody who is new to airbrushing, but also for somebody who's been airbrushing for a while. You've got an airbrush and 3 needles to get you going. You've got some nice touches like the spare gaskets and O-rings in case you need to do any maintenance or repairs. And then you've got things like the quick release mechanism, which might not be super handy, but it still is a really nice touch to include. The features just make me think I paid too much for my Harder and Steenbeck airbrush whenever I bought it about 5 or 6 years ago. I really liked that trigger limiter, fantastic, changed the way I worked on that model. I really liked the valve for changing the air pressure for the same reason as well. Really happy with it. The build quality felt solid, maybe not quite as solid as my Harder and Steenbeck. I don't know, it's hard to tell, isn't it? I suppose you can only really comment on that after a certain period of time. But I would genuinely recommend this. I'm going to keep this connected to my compressor, and I'm going to be using this with my upcoming builds and see if it can help me improve my painting and just see how it compares with my H&S airbrush that I've been using so far. So there we go guys, a great airbrush package for beginners and more experienced modelers alike. I would like to thank all of you for watching. Particular thanks to my Patreon supporters and YouTube members. I really do value the feedback and the input that you guys give me, so thank you very much. And thank you to everyone who comments and likes and subscribes and shares and views and so on. It makes a massive difference to the channel, so thank you very much guys. I hope you have a great week and you have lots of time to do some modelling. And if you do, then I hope you have fun modelling.